Cecilia awakens in the dead of night. Slipping out of bed cautiously to avoid disturbing her husband Adrian, she retrieves a hidden medication from beneath it. As she exits the bedroom, a slight shift from Adrian sends a jolt of fear through her. Moving with quiet purpose, Cecilia reaches the dressing room. There, she grabs a duffel bag overflowing with clothes and discreetly adds the medicine. To keep tabs on Adrian, she cleverly adjusts the hallway camera towards him, ensuring its functionality. Every sound seems amplified by her fear, prompting her to check the camera for any sign of awakening. Dressed in a flash, she departs the house silently through the garage. Zeus, the family dog, trails behind, initially causing her a fright. She swiftly removes his shock collar, but in a moment of chaos, the car alarm blares with Zeus as the culprit. Panic sets in as Cecilia sprints towards the fence. Light floods the bedroom as she scrambles over it. Fear propels her through the woods until she reaches the road, where she waits anxiously for her sister Emily's arrival. Time stretches, and terror clouds her face. Finally, a sigh of relief escapes her lips as Emily pulls up. But just as quickly, the horrifying sight of Adrian emerges, his shouts echoing as he shatters the car window. He lunges for them, but they speed away. However, a telltale clue remains: Cecilia's diazepam lies abandoned on the ground. 2 weeks later, Cecilia finds herself at James' house, a safe haven from her fears. Still gripped by anxiety about venturing outside, James gently persuades her to simply check the mailbox. Approaching it with trepidation, a nearby jogger sends her scrambling back indoors, overwhelmed by fear. The following day, as James tackles home renovations, Cecilia's paranoia takes hold. She's caught shielding her computer camera when a sudden ring at the doorbell jolts her. It's Emily at the door. Cecilia's initial relief turns to suspicion, the fear of her husband trailing them gnawing at her. However, Emily arrives bearing unexpected news. Brandishing her phone, she reveals an article claiming Adrian's death. Cecilia grapples with disbelief, seeking answers about the circumstances. To James and Emily, she pours out her heart, detailing the controlling grip Adrian exerted over every aspect of her life, from her appearance and speech to her very thoughts. The abuse, she reveals, transcended physical brutality. The next day, a newfound confidence allows Cecilia to venture outside with greater ease. Unaided, she retrieves the mail, earning praise from James and his daughter, Sydney, for her accomplishment. James discovers one of the letters addressed specifically to Cecilia. Later, Cecilia and Emily find themselves in a lawyer's office. Adrian's brother, a legal professional himself, unveils the deceased's final wishes, a hefty sum of $5 million bequeathed to Cecilia, with the caveat that she remains free of criminal charges and maintains mental stability. That night, overwhelmed with gratitude for their unwavering support, Cecilia surprises James and Sydney with gifts. James receives a towering ladder, and Sydney is overjoyed with a bank account prepped to launch her fashion school dreams. They share a joyous celebration before Cecilia retreats to her room. Yet, a persistent feeling of unseen eyes lingers. The following morning, James departs for work, entrusting Cecilia with the task of waking Sydney. However, a lapse in focus leaves the stove unattended, igniting the breakfast. Thankfully, the young woman acts swiftly, extinguishing the flames with a fire extinguisher. Later, alone in the house, a sense of unease washes over Cecilia. Compelled to investigate, she meticulously searches the entire residence, finding nothing amiss. Suddenly, a jarring sound pierces the silence, the front door creaking open. Trembling, Cecilia cautiously approaches the entrance, but the space is vacant. Despite the apparent emptiness, a disquieting sensation lingers. As night falls, Cecilia and Sydney find themselves seeking solace in Sydney's room, seeking refuge from the unsettling events. Suddenly, a violent yank rips the covers from their bodies, followed by a flickering of the room's light, jolting Cecilia awake. A fleeting glimpse of a figure in the room sends a shiver down her spine, but upon closer inspection, it reveals itself to be nothing more than Sydney's mannequin. As she reaches for the discarded covers, another phantom presence sends her reeling, a dark shape seemingly occupying the nearby chair. A desperate throw of the covers meets only empty air. With trembling hands, she attempts to pull the covers back onto the bed, but they remain stubbornly taut. A horrifying realization dawns as she looks down. The fabric appears pressed down, as if by an unseen weight. Panic rising, Cecilia screams for James, inadvertently waking Sydney. He rushes in, finding Cecilia in a state of distress. Seeing nothing amiss himself, James offers gentle reassurance, urging her not to let the memory of Adrian continue to torment her. Cecilia lands a job interview. The interviewer's initial demeanor shifts from professional to flirtatious as they settle in. However, his interest wanes as he detects her growing nervousness. He requests to see her portfolio, but as she opens her bag, her heart plummets, her work is inexplicably missing. The emotional blow triggers a complete collapse, leaving her unconscious. Back at the hospital, the doctor advises Cecilia to rest while awaiting lab results. Alone in the shower, the ring of the phone startles her. It's the doctor, revealing the culprit behind her fainting: high levels of diazepam in her system. A chilling discovery awaits her on the bathroom sink: a bottle of diazepam, marred by a bloody fingerprint. Determined to get to the bottom of this, Cecilia enlists James to accompany her to a meeting with Adrian's brother. Cecilia lays out her suspicions about the diazepam, accusing Adrian of placing it in the bathroom. The brother, however, dismisses her claims with a dismissive wave. Undeterred, Cecilia persists, insisting Adrian isn't truly dead. She believes he's somehow become invisible and that her suspicions are no secret to his brother. James is visibly shaken by her outburst, while the brother remains unimpressed. He reveals a shared history of torment, claiming Adrian used similar manipulative tactics to infiltrate his mind as well. To solidify his point, he presents a picture of Adrian's lifeless body. He readily admits to experiencing a sense of relief upon his brother's demise. Seeking support, Cecilia reaches out to Emily, but the conversation quickly spirals into awkwardness. Her sister reveals having read a scathing email containing Cecilia's harsh feelings. Cecilia vehemently denies sending the message, pinning the blame on Adrian. Emily, however, remains unconvinced, urging her to seek professional help. Alone in the dead of night, Cecilia frantically checks her sent emails and discovers the one addressed to Emily. Just then, Sydney enters the room and stumbles upon Cecilia in a state of tearful despair. After offering words of comfort, they decide to head out. As Sydney rises to her feet, an unseen force strikes her. She immediately accuses Cecilia, but despite her pleas of innocence, neither James nor Sydney are swayed. Left alone in the house, Cecilia becomes a prisoner of her escalating fear. Convinced of Adrian's lingering presence, she begins calling out to him. Grabbing a bag of coffee, she creates a barrier by scattering it across the floor in one room, positioning herself strategically at the opposite end of the door. Consumed by the belief that Adrian is lurking nearby, she pleads for him to leave her in peace. A sudden plan forms in her mind. She dials Adrian's phone, and a faint ringing pierces the silence, seemingly emanating from within the ceiling. Cecilia scrambles up into the attic, her eyes searching for any sign of him. Finding the space empty, she calls his number again, following the direction of the ringing. This leads her to a discovery: a set of keys, a knife, and most importantly, her missing design portfolio. A sound erupts behind her, sending a jolt of fear through her. She grabs a paint can and flings it towards the opening in the ceiling, the viscous liquid momentarily outlining the silhouette of a man. Disoriented, Cecilia descends from the attic, searching for the source of the sound. A gurgling noise draws her attention to the kitchen, where she finds the sink overflowing with paint. Suddenly, an unseen hand clamps down on her, lifting her effortlessly. She's thrown around the house like a rag doll, a desperate struggle ensuing between them. The unseen assailant chases her relentlessly, attempting to strangle her. In a surge of adrenaline, Cecilia fights back, managing to break free and escape the house. Hailing an Uber, she barks out a single destination: her old home with Adrian. Upon arrival, she instructs the driver to wait before venturing inside. Zeus, her loyal companion, trails close behind as she descends to the basement laboratory. Cecilia's gaze falls upon a cluster of unfamiliar gadgets. Spotting a tablet mounted on the wall, she uses it to decipher their functions. With a triumphant click, she deactivates one of the devices, revealing an invisibility suit draped over a mannequin. As Cecilia reaches for the suit, Zeus lets out a sharp bark, his focus shifting towards something unseen. The realization dawns on her: she's not alone. Panicked, she seeks refuge in the bedroom's dressing room, but the invisible figure relentlessly pursues her. The door swings open, yet remarkably, she remains momentarily undetected. Earlier, while fleeing in the Uber, Cecilia had managed to reach Emily, arranging a late-night meeting. Now, seated in a restaurant, she anxiously casts glances at the empty chair across from her. When Emily finally arrives, Cecilia urgently relays her discoveries from Adrian's house, proof that he might still be alive. Their conversation is brutally interrupted. A knife materializes in mid-air, plunging into Emily's chest in a silent, deadly attack. In a shocking twist, the weapon instantly finds itself clutched in Cecilia's hand. A scream pierces the air as a restaurant patron witnesses the scene. Chaos erupts as patrons recoil in horror. Cecilia, pinned down and utterly bewildered, is apprehended by the authorities. She's thrown into a locked asylum room, her frantic pleas of innocence echoing off the sterile walls. She fixates on the empty corners, muttering accusations that Adrian is the true killer, his unseen presence a constant torment. James and another detective enter, ready to question her. Cecilia insists she has evidence about Adrian, but can't reveal the details because he's present, yet unseen. As the other detective departs, she pleads with James for a shred of belief. Later, a doctor delivers a startling revelation: Cecilia is pregnant, likely within the past month. The next day, Adrian's brother arrives at the asylum. With a cruel twist, he informs her that criminal charges and a potential insanity plea have rendered her ineligible to inherit Adrian's money. Cecilia scoffs, drawing an unflattering comparison between him and his narcissistic, sociopathic brother. He presents a chilling ultimatum: sign the document and forfeit the money, or relinquish the baby and return to Adrian. Unswayed, Cecilia defiantly steals a pen from him during a moment of distraction. He warns of his return in 3 days to finalize her decision. Alone after a thorough inspection by the orderly, Cecilia enters the shower. The pen becomes a weapon. As she prepares to inflict a fatal injury, a desperate whisper escapes her lips: "You won't get the baby." In a shocking turn of events, an invisible hand clamps down on hers. Reacting with a surge of adrenaline, she plunges the pen repeatedly into her unseen assailant. The security guard bursts in, only to find the damaged invisibility suit as evidence of the struggle. He attempts to subdue the invisible figure with a stun gun, but the tables are turned as the assailant redirects the weapon towards the guard. Cecilia flees in a desperate bid for escape, but is swiftly apprehended by 2 guards. As they escort her back to her cell, the unseen man reappears, eliminating them one by one with ruthless efficiency. The guards remain blissfully unaware of their attacker until it's too late. With the floor cleared, the invisible man discards the weapon. Seizing this opportunity, Cecilia retrieves the discarded stun gun and gives chase. The pursuit leads them to the stairwell, where she fires a shot in his direction. They burst out of the facility and into the pouring rain. Cecilia, weapon in hand, scans her surroundings for any sign of him. A sound draws her attention, and she lunges towards it, oblivious to the security guards now hot on her heels. A nearby open car trunk appears to be a potential hiding spot, and she cautiously approaches. Suddenly, a grip clamps around her throat. The invisible man threatens to harm someone she cares about, like Sydney, unless she submits. Cecilia struggles against his hold, finally managing to break free and escape the confines of the asylum grounds. As she emerges from the fence, the invisible man speeds towards her in his car. Cecilia fires back, her shots causing another vehicle to lose control and crash. Without missing a beat, she commandeers the wrecked car and sets off in relentless pursuit. Determined to protect those he cares about, James receives a frantic call from Cecilia. Meanwhile, the invisible man breaches the house and enters her room. Sydney awakens from her slumber and instinctively reaches for the pepper spray in her bag. Guided by the sound of his movements, she unleashes a cloud of the irritant, sending him reeling. Disoriented and incapacitated, Sydney screams and attempts to escape, only to be snatched back by the unseen assailant. Just as the invisible man is about to turn his attention back to Sydney, James bursts onto the scene, becoming the target of his wrath. In a desperate plea, Sydney implores the attacker to cease his assault on her father. Her pleas are answered with the sudden arrival of Cecilia, who unleashes a torrent of fire extinguisher foam followed by a fatal shot. Examining the fallen figure, Cecilia removes the mask, revealing a shocking truth: it was Adrian's brother. The scene shifts to a tactical police unit meticulously combing through Adrian's house, responding to panic shouts emanating from within. With decisive action, the police breach a basement wall, discovering Adrian bound and helpless. Later, James recounts the details of Adrian's rescue, but Cecilia remains unconvinced by the narrative of him being a victim. James attempts to sway her perspective, but she harbors a deep suspicion that Adrian orchestrated the entire ordeal, leaving her feeling like the one with a fractured mental state. Consumed by doubt, Cecilia returns to the house that night. Adrian, evidently pleased by her arrival, welcomes her back. However, her response is far from warm. As they sit for an uncomfortable dinner, Adrian adopts a vulnerable facade, offering apologies and claiming to have learned from his mistakes. Cecilia demands a full confession of his actions, but he clings to the narrative of his brother's manipulative control. Their tense exchange continues, with James positioned outside, straining to absorb every word. Tears welling in her eyes, Cecilia seeks solace in the bathroom, leaving Adrian waiting alone at the table. His patience wears thin during her prolonged absence, culminating in a shocking act of self-destruction. After a brief pause, Cecilia returns to the scene. With a swift motion, she dials emergency services, ensuring the call goes unnoticed by the security cameras. Then, she settles down to watch the final moments unfold before him. James, alerted to the events by the emergency call, races towards the house only to find Cecilia exiting. When questioned, she claims Adrian took his own life. However, James' gaze falls upon the invisibility suit and a nearby duffel bag, triggering a wave of suspicion. Cecilia remains silent, her departure a stark symbol of finality as she walks away from the house and the tangled web of events that transpired within.